The lower maintenance deck of the warship Crimson Dominion hummed with the sound of failing machinery and frustrated workers. Hyan wiped sweat from his forehead as he crawled out from beneath the mining shuttle, his hands covered in grease and his uniform stained with oil. The air down here always smelled like burned metal and recycled atmosphere, thick enough to make his lungs ache after a 12-hour shift. He was one of 47 humans working aboard the massive vessel, all assigned to the lowest level of maintenance work. The Vrathi Empire had only discovered Earth 15 years ago, and humans were still considered a novelty at best, a liability at worst. They were small, weak by galactic standards, and lacked the natural armor or enhanced strength that most spacefaring species possessed. The only reason they were employed at all was because human hands were nimble and could fit into spaces that larger species could not reach. Hyan, you finished that hydraulic system yet? A harsh voice called out. It was Vorgath, his immediate supervisor, a bulky Vrathi with gray scales and a permanent scowl. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed faintly yellow in the dim lighting. Almost done, Hyan replied in the common trade language, keeping his voice respectful. He had learned early that showing any hint of defiance to Vorgath only made things worse. The supervisor seemed to take personal offense to humanity's existence, finding fault with every task Hyan completed, no matter how perfectly. Vorgath snorted, a sound like grinding rocks. Humans, always slow, always making excuses. I told the chief engineer that hiring your species was a mistake, but nobody listens to Vorgath. He stomped away, his heavy footfalls echoing through the metal corridors. Hyan waited until the supervisor disappeared around a corner before allowing himself a small sigh. He finished connecting the hydraulic lines, tested the pressure, and marked the shuttle as operational in his datapad. Another job done. Another day survived. The night cycle began an hour later. Most of the crew retired to their quarters, but Hyan often stayed late in the workshops. It was quieter then, peaceful. He could work on his own projects without Vorgath breathing down his neck or other workers giving him suspicious looks. Being human aboard an alien warship meant always being watched, always being judged. He was organizing his tools when he heard voices coming from one of the restricted bays down the corridor. Hyan knew he should ignore it and head back to his quarters, but curiosity got the better of him. He moved quietly toward the sound, staying in the shadows. 2 Vrathi guards stood outside Bay 17, their voices low but urgent. "The Queen is furious," one guard said. "The armor took too much damage in the battle. The shielding is completely destroyed. Can the master craftsman repair it?" The second guard asked. "They say no. They say unbonding the armor from her biology would kill her. But leaving it damaged like this? The Queen cannot go into battle without proper protection. We might lose the next engagement. What about replacing the damaged sections? The armor is 1,000 years old, forged from stellar metals that no longer exist. There are no replacement parts. The craftsmen are afraid to even touch it. They say it is beyond saving." Hyan's pulse quickened. He knew he should laugh, but the engineer in him could not resist. 1,000-year-old armor made from extinct materials with integrated biological bonding systems? That was not just a repair job. That was a puzzle that made his hands itch to solve it. The guards eventually moved on, continuing their patrol route. Hyan waited several minutes before approaching Bay 17. The door was locked, but he had access codes for most maintenance areas. His fingers hesitated over the control panel. Entering a restricted bay could get him fired, maybe even imprisoned. But what if he could help? What if the armor was not as hopeless as the master craftsman claimed? He entered the code. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The bay was dark, except for emergency lighting strips along the floor. In the center of the room, mounted on a support frame, was Queen Talvora Os war armor. Hyan had never seen it up close before. The Queen wore it during battle, and it was legendary throughout the fleet. Crimson and black metal plates covered with intricate engravings, each piece fitted together with such precision that it looked almost organic. Now, however, the armor looked broken. Energy burns scarred the chest plate. The right arm hung at an unnatural angle, its servo motors clearly destroyed. The back section, where the quantum shielding generator sat, flickered with weak, dying light. Hyan approached slowly, his engineer's mind already analyzing the damage. He pulled out a small scanner from his tool belt and ran it over the armor surface. The readings made him wince. The guards were right. This was catastrophic damage. Any normal repair would require complete disassembly, which would break the biological bonds. But maybe normal repair was not the answer. His grandfather had been a master craftsman in Seoul, specializing in restoring ancient Korean armor. His mother had been an aerospace engineer who designed shuttle engines. Both had taught him the same lesson. When conventional methods fail, adapt, improvise. See the problem from a different angle. Hyan studied the armor for another hour, taking measurements, analyzing the metal composition, mapping the energy flow patterns. An idea began to form in his mind. It was crazy. It violated probably a dozen engineering protocols. But it might work. He returned to the bay the next night cycle with materials he had carefully gathered throughout the day. Nothing that would be obviously missed from inventory. Scrap metals from decommissioned equipment. Salvaged energy cells from broken tools. A container of bonding compound that was technically expired, but still chemically stable. The work was delicate and dangerous. The armor systems were still partially active, bonded to the Queen's biology, even while she was not wearing it. One wrong move could trigger a feedback loop that would fry the entire system permanently. Hyan worked with steady hands, guided by instinct as much as knowledge. He could not replace the destroyed shielding generator, but he could rebuild it using a hybrid design that combined VIATHI technology with human engineering principles. The servo motors in the arm were beyond repair, but he carefully fabricated new ones using parts from 3 different salvage systems, creating something stronger than the originals. The most challenging part was the energy burns on the chest plate. The metal itself was irreplaceable, but he discovered that by treating it with a specific heat process and applying a molecular bonding compound, he could restore its structural integrity. It would not look perfect, but it would function. 3 nights. That was how long it took. 3 nights of careful, precise work in stolen hours, while the rest of the ship slept. Hyan barely slept himself, running on adrenaline and the pure satisfaction of solving an impossible problem. On the 3rd night, he stepped back and examined his work. The armor stood on its frame, fully repaired. The shielding generator hummed with stable power. The servo motors responded smoothly to his test commands. The chest plate was whole again. The molecular structure reinforced. It was done. Hyan cleaned up every trace of his presence, made sure no tools or materials were left behind, and slipped out of Bay 17 as quietly as he had entered. His hands trembled slightly as he walked back to his quarters. Part fear, part exhaustion, part pride. Nobody would ever know what he had done. That was fine. He had not done it for recognition. He had done it because he was an engineer, and engineers fixed broken things. As he finally collapsed onto his bunk, Hyan allowed himself a small smile before sleep claimed him. Tomorrow would be another day of thankless work under Vergath's supervision. But tonight, he had accomplished something extraordinary. He had no idea that his secret would not stay hidden for long, or that his unauthorized repair would change everything. Queen Talvora strode through the corridors of her flagship with the confidence of someone who had ruled for 3 centuries. Her 4 eyes gleamed red in the artificial light, and her scales reflected the crimson and black colors of her house. She had just returned from a diplomatic mission on the outer colonies, and her first priority was addressing the damaged war armor. The unbonding ceremony was scheduled for the next day cycle. It would be agonizing, possibly fatal, but it was the only way the master craftsman could attempt repairs. She had prepared herself mentally for the ordeal. Accepting it as necessary for the good of her fleet. She entered Bay 17 with her personal guard. The support frame stood in the center of the room, and on it Talvora stopped mid-step. Her 4 eyes widened. The armor was perfect. Not just functional, but pristine. The energy burns on the chest plate had vanished. The right arm hung properly, its joints aligned correctly. The quantum shielding generator pulsed with steady, healthy light. Who did this? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried deadly promise. Her chief of guard, Krell, stepped forward nervously. Your Majesty, we do not know. The bay has been sealed since the armor was brought here. Then check the security footage, she commanded, her voice rising. Find out who dared touch my armor without permission. The violation burned in her chest like acid. In Vrathi culture, war armor was sacred. It bonded to a warrior's biology, became part of their soul. For anyone to touch another's armor without explicit permission was among Tissi. He gravest offenses. The punishment was always the same, execution. Yet someone had not just touched her armor. They had repaired it. Fixed what her own master craftsman had declared unfixable. Within the hour, Krell returned with the security footage. Talvora watched the recording on holographic display, her 4 eyes tracking every movement. The figure was small, working in darkness with only a handheld light. The image quality was poor due to the low lighting, but she could see enough. Delicate hands, careful movements. A methodology that seemed almost gentle. Enhance the image, she ordered. The technical officer worked the controls. The image sharpened slightly, but the figure's face remained hidden in shadow. They could see the body structure, though. Small, bipedal. Not Vrathi. A human, Krell said quietly. A human? Talvora's voice dripped with disbelief. One of those fragile creatures? They barely understand basic fusion technology. How could a human repair stellar forge armor that my master craftsman could not? But the evidence was undeniable. The armor was repaired. A human had done it. Her rage crystallized into cold determination. Find them. Search every human worker on this ship. Someone will know who did this. The investigation began immediately. Vergath, the supervisor of human workers, was summoned to the throne chamber. He arrived sweating, his yellow eyes darting nervously. Your Majesty, he stammered, bowing low. I assure you, none of my human workers would dare approach your armor. They know their place. They are simple laborers, incapable of such sophisticated work. And yet one of them did exactly that, Talvora said coldly. Question them all. I want the guilty party identified within 2 cycles. Vergath bowed again and retreated quickly. He was angry, humiliated that one of the humans under his supervision had caused this crisis. He would find the culprit and make an example of them. Down in the lower decks, Hyan continued his normal duties, trying to act as if nothing had happened. But the tension aboard the ship was palpable. Word spread quickly that the Queen was furious, that someone had violated sacred protocols. Minji found him during the meal period. She was a human woman who worked in the hydroponic gardens growing food for the crew. She and Hyan had become friends, both finding comfort in speaking their native Korean language together in a ship full of aliens. People are talking, she said quietly, sitting across from him in the human workers' dining area. They say someone repaired the Queen's armor. Hyan kept his expression neutral, focusing on his food. I heard that too, Hyan. Minji's voice dropped even lower. Please tell me it was not you. He looked up, meeting her eyes. She knew him too well. He could not lie to her. I had to, he said simply. It was broken. I could fix it. Minji closed her eyes, her face going pale. Do you know what you have done? In Vrathi culture, touching someone's war armor is, I know now, Hyan interrupted. But I did not know then. I just saw something that needed repair. You have to run, hide, get off this ship somehow. Where would I go? We are in deep space. There is nowhere to hide on a warship. Before Minji could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Every display screen activated simultaneously, showing Queen Talvora's face. Her 4 eyes burned with anger. Attention all crew. Her voice boomed through the speakers. Someone aboard this vessel has violated sacred law by touching my war armor without permission. I know it was one of the human workers. That individual has 2 cycles to present themselves to me in the throne chamber. If they do not come forward... She paused, and her next words sent ice through Hyan's veins. I will execute 1 random crew member every hour until the guilty party is identified. Their silence will cost innocent lives. The choice is theirs. The transmission ended. The dining hall erupted in chaos. Aliens of various species began shouting, arguing, pointing fingers. Several Vrathi workers glared at the human section with open hostility. Minji grabbed Hyan's arm. You have to tell her. You cannot let innocent people die. If I confess, I will die anyway, Hyan said, though his voice shook. At least this way, only 1 person dies instead of many. You do not know that. Maybe she will show mercy. Maybe mercy? Did you see her face? She wants blood. Vargath appeared at the entrance to the dining hall, flanked by security personnel. All humans, return to your quarters immediately. You will be questioned individually. Anyone who resists will be detained. The human workers filed out quietly, fear written on every face. Hyan returned to his small quarters and sat on his bunk, his mind racing. He had 2 cycles. 48 hours before the executions began. He thought about his mother and grandfather back on Earth. They would never know what happened to him. Communications between Earth and the deep space fleets were infrequent at best. He thought about the armor, about how satisfying it had been to solve that impossible puzzle. Even now, facing death, he could not bring himself to regret it. The engineer in him still felt proud of what he had accomplished. He thought about the innocent, crew members who would die because of his actions. That was what finally broke through his fear. Minji was right. He could not let others pay for his mistake. The questioning began within hours. Vargath interrogated each human worker personally, his methods growing more aggressive as he failed to find the culprit. Hyan watched through his quarter's small window as his fellow humans emerged from the interrogation room. Some in tears, all clearly shaken. The first cycle passed. Then the second cycle began, 6 hours left before the first. Execution.Hyan stood and walked to the small mirror in his quarters. He looked at his reflection, at the face of a man about to die. He was 28 years old. He had expected to live much longer, to maybe return to Earth someday, to see his family again. But he had made his choice when he entered Bay 17. He had known, on some level, that there might be consequences. He just had not expected those consequences to extend to innocent people. Hyan changed into his cleanest uniform, ran fingers through his hair to make himself presentable. If he was going to face a queen and accept execution, he would do it with dignity. He left his quarters and began walking toward the throne. Chamber.Minji caught up with him in the corridor. Where are you going? To do what is right, he said simply. She grabbed his hand, squeezing it tightly. Then I am coming with you. No, this is my responsibility, not yours. You are my friend. Hyan, I will not let you face this alone. They walked together through the massive ship, two small humans among thousands of aliens, heading toward the throne chamber, where a furious queen waited. Other crew members stepped aside as they passed, sensing something significant was happening. Word spread ahead of them. By the time they reached the throne chamber doors, a crowd had gathered. The massive doors stood 20 feet tall, decorated with battle scenes and Vrathi symbols. Hyan took a deep breath and pressed his hand against the entrance panel. The doors opened slowly, revealing the vast chamber beyond. The throne chamber was the largest room Hyan had ever seen aboard the Crimson Dominion. The ceiling stretched 50 feet high, supported by massive pillars carved from dark metal. Hundreds of alien dignitaries, military officers, and court officials lined both sides of the chamber, creating a corridor that led to the throne itself. Queen Talvora sat upon that throne, wearing her war armor, the very armor Hyan had repaired. It gleamed under the chamber's lights, every piece perfectly aligned, the quantum shielding generator pulsing with steady energy. In that moment, despite his fear, Hyan felt a flash of pride at his work. The queen's 4 eyes locked onto him as he entered. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien present turned to stare at the small human walking down the central corridor. Minji stayed close beside him, her presence giving him strength. Hyan walked forward until he reached the base of the throne platform. He stopped and bowed, as he had seen others do in the presence of the queen. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. "I am Hyan. I repaired your war armor." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled crowd. Whispers erupted, then died away as the queen raised one armored hand for silence. She stood slowly, descending the steps of her throne platform. Each footfall echoed like thunder. She was massive, nearly 9 feet tall in her armor, with 4 powerful arms and scales that reflected the chamber's light. She towered over Hyan, looking down at him with those 4 red eyes. "You," she said, her voice a dangerous rumble. "A human. You dare claim responsibility for touching my sacred armor?" "I do not just claim it, Your Majesty. I did it. I spent 3 nights repairing the damage." Hyan kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. Vergath pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with anger. "Your Majesty, this human lies. They are simple laborers, incapable of such work. He must be covering for someone else, or trying to gain glory through false confession." The queen ignored her supervisor, her gaze never leaving Hyan. "My master craftsmen declared the armor beyond repair. They said unbonding would be necessary, a process that might kill me. Yet when I returned, the armor was perfect." She took another step closer. "Explain how a human, a species barely capable of atmospheric flight when we discovered you, could achieve what my own craftsmen could not." Hyan swallowed hard. "Your craftsmen were correct, Your Majesty. Traditional repair would require unbonding, but I did not use traditional methods. Show me." The command was sharp, absolute. The queen gestured, and 2 guards brought forward a metal table. With deliberate movements, she removed the gauntlet from her right upper arm and placed it on the table. Then she drew one of her ceremonial blades and slammed it down onto the gauntlet with tremendous force. The impact shattered the gauntlet's wrist joint. Servos broke. Energy conduits sparked and died. The metal crumpled. "Repair this," she commanded. "Now, before my court, prove you are not a liar seeking to avoid punishment for someone else's crime." Guards brought forward a basic toolkit and a small selection of materials. Nothing sophisticated, nothing that would make the task easy. This was a test designed to be nearly impossible. Hyan approached the table, and examined the damaged gauntlet. The test was harsh, but fair. If he could not prove his skill, then his confession meant nothing. He picked up the gauntlet, turning it in his hands, studying the damage. His mind shifted into the focused state he always entered when solving mechanical problems. The court, the queen, the threat of execution, all faded away. There was only the puzzle. The wrist joint was completely destroyed. The servo motors were shattered. But the main structure was intact, and the energy conduits could be rerouted. Hyan began to work. He removed the broken components carefully, laying them out on the table in organized rows. His hands moved with practiced precision, never hesitating. He selected a power cell from the materials provided and carefully dismantled it, extracting the energy coils within. From the corner of his eye, he could see the court watching him. The master craftsmen stood together in a group, their expressions skeptical. Vergath watched with obvious hope that Hyan would fail. Hyan ignored them all. He took pieces from 3 different broken components and began fabricating a new servo motor. It would not be identical to the original, but it would function. He worked the metal with careful heat application, using a basic plasma torch to reshape and fuse the pieces. An hour passed. Then, too, the queen remained standing, watching every movement. She did not speak, did not sit, simply observed with those 4 penetrating eyes. Hyan rerouted the energy conduits through a different pathway, one that avoided the damaged sections. He reinforced the wrist joint using a composite bonding technique his mother had taught him, normally used for shuttle hull repairs, but adaptable to armor. He installed the improvised servo motor, connecting it to the control systems with delicate wire work. The most challenging part was reconnecting the gauntlet to the armor's quantum shielding network. The systems were incompatible with standard connections. But Hyan had learned during his original repair that if he treated the energy signatures like musical harmonics rather than rigid frequencies, he could find resonance points that allowed integration. 3 hours after beginning, Hyan stepped back from the table. The gauntlet sat there, fully assembled. It looked slightly different than before, the new components creating subtle variations in the design, but it was whole. "It is done, Your Majesty," he said quietly. The queen approached the table. She picked up the gauntlet and examined it carefully, turning it in her hands. Then she slid it onto her upper right arm. The gauntlet bonded to her armor with a soft clicking sound. She flexed her hand, testing the movement. The servos responded perfectly, smoothly. Without hesitation, she generated a small quantum shield around her fist. The energy field flickering to life with stable power. The gauntlet worked flawlessly. The throne chamber remained silent. Every eye was on the queen, waiting for her judgment. Then she did something completely unexpected. She laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking one. It was genuine amusement, mixed with something that might have been respect. The sound echoed through the chamber, and the assembled court looked at each other in confusion. Queen Talvora was not known for laughter. "You are either the bravest fool in this galaxy," she said, still chuckling, "or you are something I have never encountered before." She held up the gauntlet, showing it to her court. "This human repaired what our master craftsmen declared impossible. Not with our methods, not with our technology, but with improvisation and creativity." She turned back to Hyan, her expression becoming serious again. "By Vrathi law, you should die for touching sacred armor without permission. This law is absolute, unchanged for 10,000 years." Hyan bowed his head, accepting his fate. At least he had proven his worth before the end. "However," the queen continued, "there is another law equally ancient. A warrior who saves another warrior's armor from destruction is owed a life debt. Your repair saved my armor from unbonding, which might have killed me. By that law, I owe you my life." She walked in a slow circle around Hyan, considering. two laws in conflict. One demands your death. One demands I honor you. This is a puzzle even more complex than repairing armor. The queen returned to her throne and sat, her four eyes studying Hyan intently. I offer you a choice, human called Hyan. First option, accept execution with full honors. You will die as a warrior, and your name will be recorded in our histories as the human who dared to repair the queen's armor. Your death will be quick and painless. She paused, letting that option settle. Second option, become my personal engineer and chief of all human workers aboard this vessel. You will be responsible for maintaining my armor, my personal equipment, and overseeing the work of your fellow humans. But understand this clearly. If you accept this position, all human failures become your failures. All human successes become your successes. You will represent your entire species aboard my ship. Murmurs erupted throughout the court. Vergath's face turned purple with rage. Your Majesty, he shouted. This is madness. Humans are inferior workers, barely capable of basic maintenance. Making one of them chief engineer is an insult to all proper engineers aboard this vessel. The Queen's eyes turned cold as she looked at Vergath. You have been supervisor of human workers for 2 years. In that time, they have been confined to the simplest tasks, always under suspicion, never trusted with important work. Yet this human achieved what you and the master craftsman could not. Perhaps the problem is not human capability, but your failure to recognize their potential. Vergath's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He stepped back into the crowd, humiliated before the entire court. Queen Talvora returned her attention to Hyan. Choose, human engineer. Death with honor, or life with responsibility. Either way, you have earned my respect. Hyan looked at Minji, who stood beside him with tears in her eyes. He thought about the other human workers, living in fear and looked down upon. He thought about what his mother and grandfather would want him to do. I choose life, Your Majesty, he said clearly. I accept the position and all the responsibility that comes with it. I will serve your ship and represent my people with honor. The Queen smiled, showing teeth that could tear through metal. Then let it be known throughout this fleet, Hyan, human engineer, is now chief engineer of human operations and personal engineer to Queen Talvora. His word carries my authority. Anyone who disrespects him disrespects me. She stood again, and the court bowed. This audience is ended. Chief Engineer Hyan, report to my personal workshop tomorrow. We have much work to discuss. As the court began to disperse, Minji grabbed Hyan in a tight hug. You did it, she whispered. You actually survived. Hyan hugged her back, his legs suddenly weak with relief and exhaustion. He had walked into this chamber expecting to die. Instead, he had changed his life and possibly the lives of every human aboard the ship. But as Vergath pushed past them, giving Hyan a look of pure hatred, he realized that acceptance from the Queen did not mean acceptance from everyone. His new position had made him powerful. It had also made him enemies. The Queen's personal workshop was nothing like the cramped, dirty maintenance bays where Hyan had spent the past 2 years. The space stretched across an entire deck section, filled with advanced fabrication equipment, materials from a dozen different worlds, and diagnostic tools that most engineers could only dream of using. Hyan stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. Just yesterday, he had been a low-level maintenance worker. Now he had access to resources that seemed almost unlimited. Impressive, is it not? Queen Talvora's voice came from behind him. She entered the workshop without her war armor, revealing her natural form. She was still massive, her scales a deep crimson, but somehow less intimidating without the armor's bulk. Your Majesty, I do not know what to say. Then say nothing. Instead, Show me your plans for improving our maintenance systems. You have observed our methods for 2 years. You must have thoughts on how they could be better. Hyan had many thoughts, actually. He had spent countless hours watching Vrothy engineers work inefficiently, seeing problems that could be solved with different approaches, noticing patterns of failure that could be prevented with proper planning. Over the next week, he began implementing changes. He started small, reorganizing the tool storage systems in the human workers area to reduce time wasted searching for equipment. He created maintenance schedules based on predictive analysis rather than waiting for systems to fail completely. He cross-trained human workers so that knowledge was not isolated to single individuals. The results were immediate and measurable. Repair times dropped by 30%. Equipment failures decreased. The human work crews, initially nervous about their new chief engineer, began to see the benefits of his systematic approach, but not everyone was pleased. Pergath, demoted to a standard engineering position after Hyan's appointment, simmered with resentment. He gathered a group of like-minded Vrothy engineers who felt insulted by a human's elevation to such an important position. They followed the letter of Hyan's new regulations, but looked for every opportunity to undermine his authority. Hyan tried to bridge the gap. He held meetings with the Vrothy engineers, asking for their input, incorporating their knowledge into his plans. Some responded positively, appreciating being consulted rather than ordered. Others, led by Vergath, refused to cooperate. "You are making progress," Minji told him one evening as they shared a meal in the human workers' dining area. She had been promoted to head of agricultural systems, another benefit of Hyan's new influence. "The Queen sees value in our people now. Other humans are getting better assignments, more respect. But Vergath and his group still hate us," Hyan replied. "I can see it in their eyes. They think we are stealing positions that should belong to them. Let them think what they want. We are proving our worth through results." Hyan wanted to believe her, but a nagging worry troubled his mind. Vergath was too quiet lately, too compliant. It felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. 2 weeks after Hyan's appointment, the storm arrived. It began during the night cycle. Alarms blared throughout the ship, jerking Hyan awake in his quarters. He grabbed his communicator and ran toward the engineering deck, his heart pounding. The corridors were filled with crew members rushing to emergency stations. Through the communication channels, Hyan heard scattered reports of life support failures in multiple sections of the ship. When he reached the main engineering control room, chaos greeted him. Display screens showed red warning indicators across 3 different decks. Atmosphere processors were failing. Oxygen levels were dropping. Temperature controls had malfunctioned. What happened? Hyan demanded, pushing through the crowd of engineers. A Vrothy technician looked up from her console. "The maintenance protocols you implemented last week. They triggered a cascade failure in the environmental systems." Hyan's blood ran cold. "That is impossible. I tested those protocols extensively. They could not cause this kind of failure. The evidence says otherwise." Vergath's voice came from across the room. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression smug. "Your human methods have endangered the entire ship. Dozens of crew members are in danger of suffocation." Hyan rushed to the main console and pulled up the system logs. The failures had started in areas recently modified according to his new maintenance schedules. The timing was damning. His protocols had gone active at the beginning of the night cycle. The failures began 30 minutes later. "Seal the affected sections," he ordered. "Reroute atmosphere from adjacent areas to maintain oxygen levels. Deploy emergency breathing equipment to anyone trapped." The engineers moved to follow his commands, but he could see doubt in their eyes. They were wondering if the human chief engineer had made a catastrophic mistake. Queen Talvora arrived 15 minutes later, still strapping on pieces of her war armor. "Report," she commanded. The chief systems officer, a Vrathi named Theron, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we have multiple life support failures across 3 decks. Initial analysis suggests the failures originated from new maintenance protocols implemented by Chief Engineer Hyan." The Queen's 4 eyes turned to Hyan. "Is this true?" "The failures occurred in areas using my new protocols. Yes," Hyan admitted. "But I did not cause this. Something is wrong with the data. I need time to investigate." "Time is something those suffocating crew members do not have," Vergath interjected. "Your Majesty, I warned you that putting a human in charge of critical systems was dangerous. This disaster proves I was correct." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled engineers. Hyan could feel his position crumbling. All the progress he had made, all the respect he had earned, was evaporating because of failures he knew he had not caused. "How long do you need?" the Queen asked Hyan. 12 hours, Your Majesty. Give me 12 hours to find the real cause of these failures." She considered for a long moment. "You have your 12 hours. But understand this clearly. If you cannot prove your innocence, you will face severe consequences. I may have granted you my protection, but I will not let that protection endanger my crew." She turned to her guards. "Place Chief Engineer Hyan and his human team under watch. They will investigate, but they will not be left unsupervised." As the Queen left, Hyan felt the weight of dozens of hostile stares. Minji appeared at his side, along with 3 other human engineers he had trained. "We know you did not cause this," Minji said quietly. "Tell us what you need." Hyan pulled them to a private workstation, away from the Vrathi engineers, who clearly hoped to see him fail. "We need to analyze the system logs in detail. There must be evidence of what really happened." They worked frantically, racing against the 12-hour deadline. The surface data all pointed to Hyan's protocols causing the failures. But as they dug deeper, Minji found something odd. "Look at this," she said, showing Hyan a data file. "The maintenance logs show your protocols were executed exactly as designed. But there is another set of commands here, hidden in a subfolder. They ran right after your protocols, specifically targeting the systems your maintenance had just verified as operational." Hyan examined the hidden commands. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the systems and made it look like his protocols were responsible. The sabotage was sophisticated, designed to be discovered only after significant damage occurred. Who had access to create these commands? He asked. Minji traced the authorization codes. Vergath and his team of engineers. Hyan's hands clenched into fists. Vergath had not just tried to discredit him. The former supervisor had endangered lives, risked the entire ship, all to prove that humans did not deserve their positions. "We need more evidence," Hyan said. "Something undeniable. If we accuse Vergath without proof, it will look like we are shifting blame." They continued investigating, finding layer after layer of sabotage carefully concealed within the system architecture. Vergath had spent weeks preparing this, setting up the failures to trigger precisely when they would cause maximum damage and make Hyan look most responsible. But the investigation also revealed something even more disturbing. The sabotage included one final element that had not yet activated, a complete reactor shutdown sequence that would trigger in approximately 6 hours. If that sequence executed, the ship's main reactor would overload and destroy the entire vessel. Vergath had not just tried to discredit Hyan. He had gone completely insane, willing to kill everyone aboard the ship rather than see humans in positions of authority. "We have to tell the Queen," Minji said, her voice shaking. "She will not believe us without showing her. Bring all the evidence files." "We go now." They rushed back to the throne chamber, where Queen Talvora was coordinating the emergency response. When Hyan burst in with his team, guards moved to intercept them. "Your Majesty," Hyan called out, "I have evidence. Vergath sabotaged the systems and framed my team. But there is something worse. He planted a reactor overload sequence that will trigger in less than 6 hours. If we do not stop it, it will destroy the ship." The Queen's expression darkened. "Show me this evidence, now." Hyan displayed the data files, walking the Queen through every piece of proof they had found. The hidden commands, the authorization codes, the carefully planned cascade of failures. And finally, the reactor shutdown sequence. Queen Talvora's 4 eyes blazed with fury. "Find Vergath. Bring him to me immediately." Her guards rushed to obey, but they returned minutes later with troubling news. Vergath had disappeared. His quarters were empty. His communicator was offline. He had vanished into the vast lower sections of the ship. "The reactor sequence," the Queen said urgently. "Can you disable it remotely?" Hyan tried, his fingers flying across the controls. But Vergath had protected his sabotage well. The shutdown sequence was locked behind multiple security barriers, each requiring physical access to different parts of the reactor core to disable. "I cannot do it from here," Hyan admitted. "Someone will have to go into the reactor core manually and shut down the sequence." "But Your Majesty, the radiation levels in the core are lethal to most species. Even with shielding, exposure time would be limited to minutes." The Queen began strapping on the rest of her war armor. "Then I will go. My armor can withstand the radiation long enough to complete the shutdown." "Wait," Hyan said, an idea forming in his mind. "There might be another way." Queen Talvora turned to face Hyan, her 4 eyes intense with urgency. The countdown to reactor overload continued on every display screen in the throne chamber. 5 hours and 43 minutes remaining. "Speak quickly, human," she commanded. "What is this other way?" Hyan pulled up data on his portable terminal, showing it to the Queen. "The radiation in the reactor core is deadly to most species." "Yes, but human radiation resistance is measurably higher than Vrathi or most other species in the fleet. Not by much, but enough to potentially buy a few extra minutes of working time." "You propose sending yourself into lethal radiation?" The Queen's voice carried disbelief. "That is suicide." "It might be," Hyan admitted. "But humans have another advantage. We are stubborn. We do not know when to quit. Even when our bodies are failing, we can push through on determination alone. I have studied the shutdown sequence. If I can reach the core access points and work quickly, I might survive long enough to complete it." Minji grabbed his arm. "No, Hyan, no. This is insane. Even if you survive the initial exposure, the radiation damage will kill you within days. But the ship will survive," Hyan replied quietly. "And everyone aboard it." Queen Talvora studied him carefully. "You would sacrifice yourself for a ship full of aliens, most of whom have treated your species with contempt?" "I would sacrifice myself for my friends aboard this ship," Hyan said, looking at Minji and the other human engineers. "And I would do it because it is the right thing to do. You gave me a position of responsibility. You trusted me when others said humans were worthless. I will not betray that trust by letting this ship die when I can prevent it." The Queen was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You have courage worthy of a Vrathi warrior. But you will not go alone. I will accompany you. Your Majesty, with respect, your armor can protect you from many things. But sustained reactor radiation will eventually penetrate even stellar-forged metal. If we both die, the ship has no leader." "Then I will go," Minji said suddenly. "Hyan is right about human radiation resistance. 2 of us working together could complete the shutdown faster, increasing both our chances of survival." Hyan started to protest, But Minji cut him off. Do not waste time arguing. You cannot do this alone. You know it. I know it. Everyone in this room knows it. We go together, or we do not go at all. The queen looked between the two humans, then made her decision. So be it. But you will take the best radiation shielding we have. And medical teams will be standing by the moment you exit the core. She issued rapid commands. Engineers brought heavy radiation suits, normally used for emergency reactor maintenance. Hyan and Minji suited up, the equipment bulky and uncomfortable but necessary. Medical staff prepared for radiation poisoning treatment, though everyone knew the exposure they were about to endure would likely be beyond normal treatment protocols. The countdown continued. 5 hours and 12 minutes. Hyan and Minji traveled to the reactor level, escorted by the queen herself. The corridors grew hotter as they descended, the air thrumming with contained energy. Warning signs decorated every surface, reminding crew that only authorized personnel could enter the core area. At the final checkpoint, the queen stopped them. If you succeed, you will have saved thousands of lives. Humans will be honored throughout the Vrathi Empire. If you fail, you will die as heroes. Either way, I will ensure your people know what you did here. Hyan bowed. Thank you, Your Majesty. Take care of the other human workers. They deserve better than what they have had. They will receive better. You have my word. Hyan and Minji passed through the checkpoint into the reactor access corridor. The temperature jumped immediately, despite the environmental controls. Their suit monitors began registering radiation levels that made both of them swallow hard. This is it, Minji said through the suit's communication system. Ready? Not even slightly, Hyan replied. But let us do it anyway. They opened the inner door to the reactor core. The heat hit them like a physical blow. Even through the heavy suits, they could feel it burning against their skin. The reactor itself was a massive sphere of contained energy, suspended in the center of a chamber by magnetic fields. Catwalks provided access to various control points around the sphere's perimeter. Their suit monitors screened warnings. Radiation levels were catastrophic. A Vrathi would last perhaps 10 minutes in this environment before dying. Humans might last 15, maybe 20 if they were incredibly lucky. They had to disable 4 separate shutdown sequences, each at a different access point around the reactor. I will take the north and west points, Hyan said. You take south and east. Work as fast as you can. They separated, moving quickly along the catwalks. Hyan reached the north access point and opened the control panel. The shutdown sequence was protected by security protocols that Vogath had implemented. Hyan's fingers worked through the override procedures, his hands already beginning to shake from the radiation exposure. 3 minutes to disable the first sequence. He moved to the west point, feeling his body beginning to rebel. His vision blurred. Nausea rolled through his stomach. The radiation was cooking him from the inside out. 5 minutes to disable the second sequence. His hands fumbled with the tools, coordination failing. Through the communication system, he could hear Minji working at her access points. She was struggling too, her breathing labored. First one done, she gasped. Moving to the second. Hyan tried to respond, but suddenly doubled over, vomiting inside his helmet. The bile burned his throat. His legs nearly gave out. He grabbed the catwalk railing, forcing himself to stay upright. Hyan? Minji's voice carried panic. Are you okay? Keep working, he managed to say. We are running out of time. He pulled himself to the control panel and continued the shutdown procedure. His vision was narrowing, dark spots appearing at the edges. He could feel his skin burning beneath the suit, blisters forming. 10 minutes total exposure time. Second sequence disabled. 2 more to go. Hyan stumbled along the catwalk toward the third access point. He fell once, his hands catching him against the hot metal floor. Pain exploded through his palms, but he pushed himself up and continued. His suit monitor was no longer just warning him. It was screaming that he had exceeded fatal exposure levels. His body was shutting down, cells dying by the millions every second. But he was human, and humans were stubborn. He reached the third access point and began the shutdown sequence. His fingers barely worked anymore. He had to look at each individual movement, forcing his hands to obey his brain's commands. Minji finished her second sequence. Both mine are done. Hyan, get out of there. I can finish the last one. Too far, Hyan whispered. I am closer. Almost done. 15 minutes total exposure. Third sequence disabled. Hyan tried to stand and move toward the fourth access point. His legs would not obey. He crawled instead, dragging himself along the catwalk. Each movement was agony. His entire body screamed for him to stop, to lie down, to give up. He thought about his mother and grandfather, about Minji and the other humans depending on him, about Queen Talvora trusting him with her ship. He thought about the broken armor he had repaired. Simply because it needed fixing. Hyan reached the final access point and pulled himself up using the control panel. His vision was almost gone now, just narrow tunnels of light in an ocean of darkness. His hands looked strange, the skin red and blistering beneath the suit's transparent gloves. He began the final shutdown sequence. Somewhere distant, he heard Minji screaming his name, felt her hands grabbing him, trying to pull him away from the panel. Almost done, he mumbled. Just need to finish. The sequence required a final confirmation code. Hyan's fingers hovered over the keypad. He could barely see the numbers anymore. He entered the code from memory, from the countless hours he had spent studying the reactor systems. The panel flashed green. Shutdown sequence disabled. All 4 sequences neutralized. The reactor overload was stopped. Hyan collapsed. The next thing he remembered was pain. Overwhelming, total pain that consumed every nerve in his body. He tried to scream, but his throat would not work properly. He is awake, someone said. A voice he did not recognize. Increase the pain suppressors, another voice commanded. This one he knew. Queen Talvora. Cool relief flooded through his veins as medication took effect. The pain reduced to manageable levels. Hyan opened his eyes, or tried to. They felt crusted shut. Do not try to move, the Queen's voice said. You are in medical. You and Minji both survived, though it was extremely close. The radiation exposure you endured would have killed a Vrathi 3 times over. Hyan managed to make a sound that might have been a question. The reactor is stable. The Queen continued, understanding. You disabled all the shutdown sequences. The ship is safe. Vergath was found attempting to steal an escape pod. He will face execution for his crimes. Over the following days, Hyan slowly regained consciousness for longer periods. The medical staff told him that he had received radiation exposure equivalent to standing at the center of a nuclear explosion. His body had absorbed enough radiation to kill most known species instantly, but humans, they discovered, had remarkable regenerative capabilities. Combined with advanced Vrathi medical technology and treatments, originally developed for treating battlefield radiation wounds, Hyan and Minji were recovering. Slowly, painfully, but recovering. The scars would never fully heal. Both of them would carry the marks of radiation burns for the rest of their lives. But they would live. 3 weeks after the incident, Hyan was finally able to walk again. The Queen summoned him to the throne chamber, though she,